morning, afternoon, evening. I don't know what I'm doing. I went to London today. My head's all messed up. Sorry. So, I'm pretty sure it's evening, unless you live in like America or something. So yeah, we're going to be talking. I suppose we're going to be talking about tax and punishments, and how different people are treated. I think. So I'll go over some of the details in a moment, but just the headline stuff is, for those who don't know, PPE Medpro, which is the company Doug Barrowman, who's Michelle Mone's husband, set up, but she also took profits from it. So she's more than involved. She's not just involved because she's Doug Barrowman's husband. Like, we're not just talking about Michelle Mone because she's the famous one. And in actual fact, all of this nonsense is Doug Barrowman's fault. She was materially involved because not only did she get them the contract, she was the person on the inside of the Conservative Party that got the contract, but she personally was given a huge payout of tens of millions of pounds as a result of those PPE Medpro contracts. So she is materially involved in this, and but she is also the famous one. And it now transpires. So on top of the, whatever it is, 122 million, I think, or 122, 125, doesn't matter. I mean, there's huge numbers that they owe because they were given money by the government for stuff that was crap. So they've got to give the money back. And then they're being charged interest at 8% per annum. So that's gone up like quite a few million now. And then on top of it, we discovered... It's like buzzing phones too. Right, okay. Do you know what? I'm just going to turn my phone off because someone said this yesterday. And my phone's not doing anything. But if I turn it off, you can't blame the... Go away. Oh, for goodness sake. You can't blame the phone then. Right, I'm going to chuck it over there as well. Right. So if it still does it, it's something else. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So... They owe, it turns out, they didn't pay their tax either. They didn't pay their tax bill. So they owe £39 million in tax. Now I'm going to go over the details of that in a moment, because I want to talk about a couple of other things first. So first of all, actually, hold on. Someone's just said something. Chris has said, my question is, why isn't HMRC going after her and her husband for the unpaid tax bill? Any ordinary individuals would have been hounded relentlessly by them. So the two things, as I understand it. The first is that PPE Medpro is going into administration. It's like, oh, sorry, it didn't make any money. It made a fortune. It made tens of millions of pounds. Right. Okay, I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not a business expert. But this is what happened, right? PPE Medpro didn't exist before May 2020. It was set up specifically to get access to the VIP lane. Michelle Mone was therein, right? Doug Barrowman was the one who was setting the business up. And I think there was someone else involved. Doesn't matter about that. So this company is set up specifically to get those contracts, right? So they get paid about £250 million from the government for two contracts. One of them they delivered, and it's still, we paid over the odds for it, but as far as anyone's concerned, they did deliver what they were asked for, so there's nothing we can do about that, right? The other contract was not fulfilled. It was for surgical gowns, which came apparently improperly packaged and with no proper certification, and they had to be sterile surgical gowns, so there was no way, when the NHS took receipt of them, there was no way that they could verify that they were at all suitable as sterile surgical gowns, right? So they rejected them. Quite why the government, but mind you, the government gave them a load of money up front as well. Again, that's a wrong one. That shouldn't happen. So anyway, so they go off with, so that contract's worth, I think it's something like 120 odd million pounds. And then, so they've done that, right? As part of the process of them getting this equipment, even the Duff equipment, they had to pay suppliers. So that's outgoing. So they paid suppliers. And they had a middleman in Asia as well. So they paid them as well. So the person who actually procured it for them. Because they didn't know how to procure medical equipment. Like, one of them sells knickers. I actually don't know what the bloke does. other than just stuffs his pocket with money. And then, so they've paid out, right? They've paid out the supplies, paid out and they're left with literally tens of millions of pounds in profit. I think actually over half of the money was profit. And yet we're told that the company is having to go into administration because it's in financial trouble. Now, it ain't in financial trouble. What's happened is, I don't understand how this is even legal, but it clearly is because it happens all the time. Tommy Robinson plays this trick a lot. He's done this with multiple of his business things. It happens, and it shouldn't be legal. What's basically happened is here, you've got a business, it's made a load of money, it's made profits, you've paid those profits out to the people who own the business, and then you suddenly declare that the business can't pay its bills. Its tax bill because it's going into because it's no longer trade. Oh, so we've got no money coming in. No, because you only set the company up for 2 bloody contracts. It's utterly ridiculous. It frustrates me. But I'm just going to share with you something I saw today when I was in London. Ironically, it's a story from London. Wandering the streets of London. Because my appointment ended up being... I basically was in London. I'd booked trains. So I had to spend a few hours in London doing nothing because I tried to take account of delays and cancellations, which didn't happen, thankfully. But it did mean I had like 2 or 3 hours in London, 2.5 hours extra to kill, right? So I nipped into a pub and had some lunch. And scrolling my phone, look at some stories. This story came up. This is in the Standard, the London Standard, right? Nurse slapped with £1,000 fine by London Council for fly tipping an envelope, right? Now, she said, this is according to her, admittedly, with just this, her side of the story, but at the end of the day, if the council aren't going to say anything different, we're taking this to be the case. So, this nurse says her communal bins shared with around 25 other properties in Feltham. So the problem with communal bins, of course, is some arsehole can fill them up and you're just throwing out a reasonable amount of rubbish and there's no room for it, right? So you're a bit stuck. But anyway, she didn't just toss it into the street or anything, because that's what fly tipping is. We just toss it onto the street. This is what she says happens. She placed the cardboard envelope on top of other cardboard that was next to the bins, which were full. So the bins were full, fair enough. There was already cardboard there. So she thought to herself, well, there's already cardboard there. I'm just going to put mine on top of it, right? So why is she getting clobbered for it and not anyone else? Because it's, in her case, it's not just cardboard boxes. It's a cardboard envelope, which means her name and address is on it, right? So that's what she's done. Because they've got her name and address on it, they've got someone to fine, right? Now, here's the thing, right? So first of all, I'm going to say, okay, even if you take the view, sorry, it has to go in the bins. If the bins are full, wait till the next week. I'm going to say that's fine, by the way, because I get it. If you're stacking up cardboard next to bins, it could blow away or something like that. And then it is going to be in the streets and stuff. So I'm absolutely fine with the idea that this Hounslow Council, as it is, says you can't do that. Where I take issue is on the basis of one cardboard envelope. And again, if we assume that she's not a persistent offender, again, we might not get the full story here. Maybe the council saying, oh, we've tried to warn her, she does it all the time. But assuming it's a one-off, right? I'm going to say two things here. First of all, could they not have just issued a warning? Could they not have just said, and given the reasons, don't do this, please, because it could blow away and then it's all over the place, and that's that's dirty in our streets, and it's a hazard. Can you not do it? And then if they do it again, then fine. But I'm also going to say, so even if you think to yourself, right, look, you've been warned and you've still done it. We think you knew you weren't supposed to do it and you did it anyway. Okay, fine. £1,000? That is excessive, is it not? For one bit of cardboard. One bit of cardboard, £1,000. That is excessive. But worse than that. So she can't pay it. She's a nurse, right? She can't pay £1,000 fine living in London. So she's not been able to pay it. So now she's going to face legal proceedings. She's going to be prosecuted. Now, I don't know what ultimately will happen other than the fact she's going to be really stressed. And, you know, someone that's very important, does a very important job, is going to be extremely stressed. And maybe at the end of it, the judge will say, well, this is utterly ridiculous. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll say, well, you know, judges' hands are tied, right? The law's the law. If the law is clear and the penalty is clear, then she will not only have to pay the fine, but more in it. She's going to end up having to set up a payment plan and, you know, for like one ridiculous thing. You can't. So she could potentially, I don't think she's going to go to prison, right? But in theory, she could. Like, if she still can't work out a payment plan or misses payments or something. So if she's convicted, she will have to pay the fine plus extra on top, plus legal costs. And she'll have to set up a payment plan to do that, which could take several years. And if she misses any payments, she probably wouldn't, but in theory, she could go to prison. We also know that sometimes people who get into legal financial difficulty, let's say, if it's the DWP's fault, they're overpaid benefits, but they can't afford to pay them back, you can actually end up being convicted for that. And even if she doesn't go to prison, it's still a conviction. She's saying herself, this could be awkward on DBS checks. Now, I don't think it comes up on a DBS check, I have to say. But nonetheless, it's still a conviction. She could end up with a criminal conviction, which is not fair for something like this. Leave nurse, well, I would say leave anyone alone. It makes it particularly harsh, given that it is a nurse living in London on obviously not a great wage. But I'm just going to I thought I'd just have to counterpoint this with Michelle Mone and Doug Barrowman, right? Because they now owe the British taxpayer, I think it's about 180 something million. What did I put on the thumbnail? Hold on, it says here. It'll say here somewhere in this article. 188 million pounds. They owe us 188 million pounds, right? Let's break it down. 122 million pounds, which they've been ordered to pay back for their surgical gowns that were not up to snuff, right? Doesn't matter that they paid for them. That's they got this contract that with a very, very large profit margin. They should have taken greater care to make sure they were getting the right stuff, right? I don't care if they were ripped off. That's up to them. Then they're being charged 8% per year, and it's been going on for a few years in interest as well. So that's added on another chunk. And now it turns out that they also haven't paid their tax bill. So they owe £39 million in taxes. And what I'm getting the impression here is what's going to happen is because this business doesn't have the assets to pay it. So it goes into administration. Creditors get to say, well, whatever assets we're going to divvy up amongst ourselves. And then that's it. Why is that it? Why is that it? PPE Medpro made a lot of money. Chase the people who, like, there's financial records of where the money went. It went to her and it went to him. Why are they not being personally made liable for it? Do you know what they've just done? These people who owe us 188 million quid, do you know what they've just done? They've just bought another 10 million quid house in Florida. In a part of Florida that's affectionately known as Billionaire Island, right? They've spent 10 million quid on a house in Florida when they owe us 188 million. And what I don't understand is why we have a legal system that says if you're poor and you owe money to the state, that you will absolutely be hounded for it back, no matter how bad your circumstance. I mean, they're reasonable in terms of they'll work out a budget, and sometimes you will only pay back a couple of quid a month, right? So as long as you set up a payment plan, the payment plans are usually reasonable, but nonetheless, they don't let it go, right? No matter how small the amount is, no matter how dire your financial situation, you will be expected to pay what you can back, and that will be formalized in a payment plan, right? You can end up with a conviction. You can end up even going to prison. for the sake of a few £1,000s owed to the state that you do not pay back, right? All of these things can happen to a poor person, but not a rich person. And why? The difference occurs to me is simply that a rich person never owes the state anything because they do it all through companies. And the company is responsible. But I say that we should have a legal system that says, no, a person is responsible. And I think it should work for everything. If a company breaks the law, an individual person needs to be responsible for that breach of the law, right? There's such a thing as inadvertent, just like there is for a person. If someone inadvertently broke the law, you go easy on them. I'm not saying lock them up and throw away the key. What I am saying is, if a company breaks the law, a person has to be responsible for that. Right? A person has to be responsible. If it's found that it was all very inadvertent or caused by, something like, something that can happen in a company. I can't remember there was something that happened recently that had a political slant on it, and I've forgotten now what it was. But it was caused by the fact. Oh, that was it. It was the Rachel Reeves landlord license thing. So their letting agency had said, we're going to sort out this license for you. And what had happened was the person who was sorting it out left the company, and then the person that replaced them didn't know about it. So it just you can understand that, right? Now, that's obviously not but let's say a company broke the law because of something like that, then you can go, okay, well, that's just shit happens, right? That's just one of those things. But by and large, there should certainly be an investigation. And if an individual did something that they shouldn't have done, and that resulted in a breach of the law, then they should be held responsible. And the same thing should happen with money, most especially with money, because it is far too easy for rich people to funnel all of their financial affairs through a company. And then when that company, when they want to get out of their legal responsibilities, just declare that company's boss. I mean, yeah, okay, sometimes you can end up in a situation where you're then barred from, like I go back to Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is barred from directing any company. So now he still has companies, by the way, but he has the people he trusts around him manage them instead because he had to declare bankruptcy. That's not going to happen here, though, is it? I want to know how it is that company can go into administration when it funneled off a load of It's not like this was a company that received 250 million, but it paid out 270 million or something. So that's not what happened at all. It was paid about 250 million ish. It paid out itself. I can't remember exactly. I think it was about half that. I think it might have even been less than half of that. I think they actually made a profit of in excess of 100%, but they made a very, very large profit, should we put it that way. It was certainly in the tens of millions, in the quite a few tens of millions. I think it was at least 60 million profit, at least. And I think it might have been more. So it made a large profit. That profit needs to be clawed back. They need to say, hang on a minute, that was profit. That was pure profit. You can use that to pay off the tax bill and part pay off what you owe. But that's not going to happen, is it? That's not, as far as I can tell, they're going to get away with it scot-free. They're not even going to be struck. They're not even going to be banned from being directors of companies, because that would actually probably do them some harm. That would actually be a punishment. Because the rich wrote the laws, Phil. Well, yes. Also, I mean, some of them are incidental. There are, as I say, there are situations in which a company isn't the same as a person, because a company might be owned by you can have companies owned by shareholders, for example. Like if you've got shares in something, you don't want to suddenly find yourself like if you're just someone an ordinary person who's got some shares and the company goes bust. I mean, you've lost your money already. You don't want to be held responsible. You don't want someone coming to you and suddenly saying, by the way, you've actually got to pay us even more because that company had debts. So there are certain situations like that, but something like this, no. That is one or two individuals who owned the company and took all the profits, and they should be made to pay them back out of their more profitable businesses if necessary. Should be accountability for being a company director. Yeah, much more than is now, because for me, this exposes serious shortcomings within the system, because it's literally the case, it seems to me, that if you're rich, you just make sure you manage all of your affairs through companies. You have multiple companies. And that's why I think it's very dodgy when people own companies that don't actually do anything. That's really dodgy. When you basically shell companies, basically, you have a company that doesn't trade. It's just there to move money around your other companies, or sometimes to give you loans, because some people dodge taxes by getting their companies to give them loans, which then they repay at like really very generous rates, because it's like like imagine this, right? So imagine, I mean, I can't do this. I don't know how it's done, but so I'm basically self-employed. I'm like a sole trader, right? So I get money from YouTube, well, Google mostly, and then I declare it to the government, and they say, well, pay us this much tax, and I pay them that tax. I mean, imagine if I just created another company and had the money go through there, and then for my personal money, I make a loan to myself where I have to pay it back at like 0% interest or something. And that's how I get paid. And I don't pay tax on that, because you don't pay tax on loans. And it's sensible you don't pay tax on loans, that you don't count as an income. But when you're, again, you know, when you're using a loan as tax avoidance, again, it's like, can we stop this? I get how some form of tax avoidance is hard to crack down on, but some of it is just taking the piss. Just an FYI, the DWP auto docks £50 a month of benefits, just been hit for it again as they overpaid a year ago, so there's no choice to not pay it back just in time for Crimbo. Well, yeah, but that has to go through a court first, doesn't it? But what I'm saying is they personally will not have anything, because it's the company. It's PPE Medpro that owes the money, not them somehow, which is ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. Criminal proceedings, or is that still false hope? Well, I don't know, because we go back to Chris's question, why isn't HMRC chasing them for it? Well, I don't know whether they are or they're not, because if we go through the article, the reason we know they owe £39 million is because it came up as part of the administration document. So PPE Medpro is going through administration, right? Because they're saying, oh, sorry, we can't pay. Oh, the company's going bust. What a shame, right? And because administrators have now gone in, they've had to work out, and when, you know, just like when you go through bankruptcy proceedings, this sort of thing is a matter of public record. I mean, that's one of the things that's supposed to try and persuade you not to go bankrupt. There are two major downsides to it, one of which is your credit rating will be shit for like 7 years. You're good luck getting credit for anything for like a 7-year period. And the other thing is the public shaming of it, because you will be on it'll be a public record that you've been declared bankrupt. So you can't hide it. But where was it now? So it says, yeah, as a result of the preliminary statement by the administrators for Viz Mazars, filed at Companies House, dated 30th of October, put the total owed to the Department for Health and Social Care at £148 million. So that's the £122 million for the gowns plus another £22 million in interest. No, that must be £26 million, sorry, in interest. And then this £39 million owed to HMRC in taxes. In fact, we've got it. There's a link to it on Companies House. The filing notice of registration of an administrator, 5th of November. Let's open it up. Ooh, for goodness sake. I'm just having a little scan through it. Can't see anything interesting there. But, you know, it's all there. It's a matter of public record. So but we didn't know before. We didn't know they owed that tax before. So are HMRC going after it, or is it just the case that, well, they were going after it. In actual fact, they were going after it because they're listed as creditors. But are they going to get it? Isn't that how Musk bought Twitter? Musk bought it with a series of loans. He has a lot of loans with a lot of people. In fact, Elon Musk, and I know this is where it gets bizarre, isn't it? Because at the time, like a year ago, Elon Musk was worth something like $250 billion or something, and he bought Twitter for like, is it 41 or 42 billion? And you think to yourself, well, that's way less than his total wealth, so he just paid for it, didn't he? Just paid for it. Well, no, because remember, rich people do not have money. They don't have cash in the bank. They have enough to cover their outgoings, but they don't have, you know, if you are worth $250 billion, you do not have $250 billion in the bank. You don't even have $40 billion in the bank, because money in the bank doesn't make you anything. In fact, money in the bank devalues. If you've got money in a current account, like if you put £1,000 into a current account and it's still there this time next year, it's effectively worth less than £1,000 because inflation nibbles away at it, and the amount of interest you get is nothing. Even if you put it in a savings account, the return you get on savings accounts, the interest, which is better than a current account, is still way less than inflation is most of the time. In fact, almost all the time, in fact. So any money you put in the bank is actually being devalued, or rich people don't want to be devalued. They want to be richer. So, you know, it's all invested. It's all locked into investments, stocks and shares. So in order to service his loan, Elon Musk's loan, because he had to take out a load of loans to do it, in order to service it, there was a time, if you recall, I can't remember if it was 2023 or early 2024. He did have to sell some of his Tesla shares, didn't he? He had to sell some of his shares to keep servicing this loan. And he actually said during the election campaign, someone asked him what will happen if Trump loses, and he says we'll be effed, basically. And he was referring to his own financial situation, because if Trump had lost, because obviously Trump winning gave Musk the keys to quite a lot of lucrative contracts. So if it had lost, he'd have been stuck. He wouldn't have been able to serve it. He'd have had to carry on selling his shares to service the loans. Is administration a bankruptcy? Well, it's the process. I don't know. You know, it's the process of managing it. So administration is just literally the process of managing a company, in this case, that cannot pay its debts. What happens at the end of it, it can be. But again, I would like to know. I would like to know. What is that? I'm just trying to have a flick through this thing. See, what I want to know as well is, how come, is this PPE Medpro? The persons with significant control is not Doug Barrowman. Weirdly, it's someone by the name of Arthur John Lancaster, who has a correspondence address, which is 30 Old Bailey, ironically enough. The Old Bailey is like that where the High Court is, isn't it, or something? Who's classed as the person with significant control. This is dodgy. Could a President Newsom clip Musk's wings? Yeah, easy. If the Democrats take control of, if some, like, let's say Trump messes up and Miller messes up and they all mess up, which is possible, by the way. They are actually quite stupid in some ways. So if MAGA messes up and MAGA basically implodes, and the Democrats in a few years' time win the White House and both houses in Congress. Let's say, why not? Why not? They can't get the Supreme Court back unless they can, but it would be really bad mojo. So the Supreme Court's gone for a long time. But in fact, there's part of me, and I'm not seriously suggesting this, by the way, but part of me looks at the Supreme Court and what a mess that is. And it's totally, literally the only thing that will fix that is a revolution. So part of me actually thinks, well, I mean, if America did have to descend into civil war, then at the end of it, as long as the good guys win, then they may have to restructure a lot of things, including they might have to just build the country back from scratch, which means maybe coming up with a better judicial system. But we don't hope for that, because a lot of people have to suffer for that to happen. But let's say the Democrats could take the White House and both houses in Congress. Then not only could they, but they should this time decide, can we not just go back to business as normal? Can we actually sort these bastards out? And what they ought to do is launch a full investigation into everything that happened, because I will bet you Elon Musk has broken a lot of laws. I think quite a few of them will have done. I think there needs to be no fear of being labelled as political witch hunters, right? I think they need to say, we're going to have an investigation here. You make the investigation as independent as possible so that for reasonable people, it's like at arm's length, but you have a full investigation, and you make sure you uncover all aspects of criminality and put the buggers in prison. Excuse me. If the police went and questioned everyone on Companies House, fraud in the UK would plummet. Obviously, most fraud is business fraud, isn't it? We haven't got enough police. But nonetheless, I cannot accept it as being even remotely just that rich people can get away with their financial... there's supposed to be a yin and yang to this, isn't there? If you make lots of money in high-risk ventures, then the flip side of that is supposed to be when it goes wrong, you pay for it. But they don't. The banking crisis, right? The bankers, people like Rishi Sunak, made an absolute fortune when it worked out and when it didn't. That's what, likes of Rishi Sunak, that was his job. Gambling with other people's money. Gambling with other people's money. When he won the gamble, he made a lot of money. When he lost the gamble, someone else stumped up. When banking as an industry lost the gamble, we all had to shell out for it. It's what you call privatizing the profits and socializing the losses, isn't it? It's like, you've got these people, they will make an absolute fortune when their gambles pay off. And I call them gambles. I mean, they sort of know what they're educated guesses more than anything else, because, but nonetheless, they're still risking. And when the risks don't pay off, some other bugger pays for it. That's not right. And the same thing with companies. If, all of these people saying, when you can't talk to them about economics if you haven't owned a business. Oh, do you own a business? Do you own a business? And it's like, but they're the ones screwing us over. People should be responsible. If money is owed to the state, it should be a matter of law that that money has gone somewhere. That money has gone somewhere, right? Now, okay, there will be cases where, because of the international nature of trade and commerce, sometimes that person will be safely tucked away in another country, and you can try and extradite them or whatever, but you may not be able to, unless you're America, unless you're like a really powerful, one of the most powerful countries, you're probably not getting them to pay you back. So sometimes, yes, the state will just lose out, because if the person responsible is out the country and they're not coming back, fine. But when it's one of your own citizens, that's different. If it's UK citizens or UK residents, that owe the money, you should be able to take recourse. So we should have a legal system that makes, when the state is owed money, a person responsible, at the very least. Like, you could also argue, because it wouldn't just be the state that might be owed by a company. You might just be a struggling business person who sold a company something. The company goes bust. Well, where's your money, right? So you could expand it. But at the very least, where the state is owed money, a person should be considered responsible. And it shouldn't be a case of, let's see if a person is responsible. It should be, no, a person is responsible. It might be more than one, but a person is responsible. Carry out the paper trail. Whoever's at the end of it is responsible, right? Make them responsible. So there should be an assumption in law that someone, at least one person, is financially liable for anything owed to the state. And then you do your best to get it back. If you can't get it back, then you force it back. Just like, as we've said here, just like you can if you owe the state something, if you're poor and you owe the state something, and you can't come up with a voluntary payment agreement, they will just take you to court, and they can then force your employer to deduct straight from your salary, which is more than a little embarrassing next time you have to go into personnel or HR. The fact that Michelle Mone still got a seat in the House of Lords, absolutely beyond belief. It is. I mean, of course, she's sort of voluntarily vacated it, but nonetheless, technically, yeah, she still has it. I think there might be moves to get rid of it, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. Because if she's not attending, it makes no difference. I don't care about that. What I care about is the fact that these two, Doug Barrowman and Michelle Mone, are still living the high life. They've literally just bought, they owe us 188 million quid, and they've just bought a 10 million quid house in Florida, in another country. It's just piss taken on an epic scale. And, this is the sort of thing that the media really should hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer. And if I was the government, I'd be doing this. I'd actually talk about this. I would say we want to deal with this because this is unfair. I'd make a big deal out of it. That'd be quite a good distraction right now, wouldn't it? Say, actually, the Supreme Court can easily be remedied by changing the law to add justices. Yes, they can do that. They can pad it out. But then you just end up in an arms race, don't you? You end up. So just like this redistricting thing that California are doing now, and they're now urging other democratic states to do the same, to counter the Republicans, right? It's purely to counter Republicans, but it just sets up an arms race, right? So some Republican states are already doing it. California says, right, we're going to do it to counter it. So now Trump is telling other Republican states to do it as well. So you just set up this arms race. The same thing would happen, because there was talk during Biden's time that he could just pack the Supreme Court out. Whereas, even I at the time sort of said, yeah, I can see that going wrong. Because all that would happen is you'd end up with like a Supreme Court of like 500 justices before you're done. Because then because at the moment, there's in theory supposed to be a natural cycle to it. There isn't really. But because the presidency often flips, it doesn't stay Republican or Democrat for very long. It really, it's very rare. We may be entering different times, who knows, but it's generally quite rare in modern times, at any rate, post-war, post-Second World War, for the presidency to remain in the same party's hands for an excessive period of time. So, it's usually 2 or 3 terms. So the idea is there's, as these justices drop off, it's sort of kept fairly even. Now, what skewed it this time was that while Biden was still president, there was a need for another justice. But because it was getting close to the election, Republicans in Congress who had the power to block, they just basically blocked his appointment. So then when Trump came in, he obviously appointed someone he wanted, and he's carried that on. So basically they ended up with this ridiculous majority now. So it's 6-3 in favour of like Republicans. But I don't think you solve that by adding, because you'd have to add 4, frankly. to take control. Oh, no, what am I on about? Hold on. No, you'd have to add 7. Sorry. No. Yes. So if the Democrats won and they wanted to like get the Supreme Court back in their favour, they'd have to add 7 new justices. That would look very, very obviously partisan, right? So then that would just give license to the next Republican administrations to do the same. It's like, it's the case that whoever's the president gets to like, or whoever controls the White House and Congress at the same time, they get to decide. They get to decide the balance of power in the Supreme Court, and at which point, that you completely undermine the whole process. Anyway. Well, Pagan there saying, Phil, I'm pretty sure I've been saying for ages now that Labour were going to look at their sister party in Denmark and immigration policy. Very possibly. I've been saying for many years, I would prefer it if the UK looked east towards our Scandinavian neighbours for an awful lot of policies, including social policies, rather than west towards America. I've said that for many years, but I've often, when I've said it, joked and said, but maybe not immigration policy. Because although Denmark has particularly stringent immigration policy, all of the Scandinavian countries, who are by and large very left-wing, they tend to be, well, sort of like, if you're thinking about like Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, they tend to be more sort of left-wing. They're social democracies, often it's called, which is like, we sometimes say centre-left politics. But even in terms of social policy, they're very enlightened in many aspects, including like penal policy. So like, particularly, I would like it if we looked at Sweden, places like Sweden for their, penal policies for like rehabilitating offenders. They have very low rates of reoffending in Sweden. And if we look towards Finland for their educational policies, they're very good. They teach critical thinking. So I've often said, I wish we would look towards our Scandinavian neighbours, because we would be much happier if we were more like the Scandinavian countries. But I did often say, but maybe not on immigration and multiculturalism, because they're not really big into they're not big into multiculturalism. And I've known quite a lot of Scandinavians from my online gaming years, where because people in Northern Europe speak English, and actually some people prefer English. I've had Danish people tell me that they prefer speaking English because speaking Danish is like speaking with a load of marbles in your mouth, is one of the most polite ways I've had it described. So young Danish people who speak English tend not to like the Danish language. They say it's horrible. But nonetheless, whether they like their own language or not, Scandinavians can speak English. They're taught to speak English really very well. So in an online gaming setting, they come to the English speaking server, so you end up getting to know them, right? And tends to be quite left-wing. Socially, in terms of things like, law and order and education, very progressive. On things like immigration and multiculturalism, though, no. No, not at all. So it's like really weird that, yes. So Labour are now deciding to look east and go, let's look at the Scandinavian countries for some inspiration. And they've decided to pick on immigration. It's like the one thing I didn't mind you not copying from them, but it is what it is. And it is what it is, because the majority of people in this country are now quite anti-immigration. It's, I in a way, I don't blame them. There are still things that would be too far. And I don't think they are actually going to copy Denmark in terms of all of their immigration policies, because some of them are, they're much more than you need. But yeah, isn't it ironic? The one thing, I'll say the one thing, to be fair, we are looking like making some progress. I mean, I know it's all going tits up in terms of the prison system at the moment and who would want to be Justice Secretary at the moment, certainly not David Lammy. But it is nonetheless the case that we have a more progressive attitude to that. We've accepted that there are far too many people in prison, that we're likely to stop over the course of this parliament short prison sentences, because they're just stupid. putting someone in prison for like 6 weeks just wrecks their life. For what? You know, there are other ways to punish people. We don't just have to punish them in prison. Violent crimes, different matter. But then for a violent crime, you'd expect more than 6 weeks, right? Supreme Court should have set periods of time for justice to sit on the court, not there until they die. They should have done that. That is certainly true. Yeah, we sort of do that in this country. That is true. However, I would still say that wouldn't solve the problem. Because in terms of getting a justice appointed, the nature of it is, if you happen to have control of the White House and and Congress at the same time, you're going to get your pick. And that may not flip between the two. It still, yeah. What I'm saying is, it still doesn't necessarily solve the problem. They should have time limits, but that's just to avoid judges ending up to, you know, like you mentally decline as you get old. There comes a point, even if you're really intelligent, and you know, it's like you don't want to do it too early, because you want to take advantage of the experience of a judge. You want the top judges in the land to be very experienced, although some of the ones on the current Supreme Court are not at all experienced. But that was Trump just packing it out with people who would do what he says. But anyway, obviously the government introduced the COVID Corruption Commissioner, but I think they could be going in much harder, particularly on Michelle Mone, Doug Barrowman, etc. John, they're saying exactly, if Mone is still free, what is the point? Well, you can't put someone in prison for something that's not a crime at the time they sort of committed the offence. You can make new offences, but you can't like put them in prison for an old one. That's not justice. But if they get away without paying it, then yeah, there's no justice. They at least need to pay back the money, all of it. And I would be in favour of changing the law to do that as well. Say, look, if you have liabilities, like in cases like this, like, you know, if you owe money to the state, you are going to pay it back. That must be the case. That's Norway I'm thinking of for prisons. It's not. Norway may do it as well, but Sweden are very good with prisons. I was specifically thinking about Sweden. I don't know a great deal about Norwegian prisons. They may be very similar. There's a lot of similarities with the Scandinavian countries in many ways. The whole point of rebalancing the Supreme Court was to overrule certain decisions like the anti-abortion decision that made corporations persons for unlimited money in elections. Well, the whole point of rebalancing it for anyone was to get your way. The Supreme Court is political. It's politically appointed, so it's a political court. It's utterly ridiculous. I mean, in this country, you can have judges. I mean, you know, anyone can make mistakes. A judge can come to a wrong conclusion through bias. They may have political biases, and that could feed into it. I'm not saying that every judgment is absolutely sound in this country, but it is free of political interference. So judges, when they're making their decisions, are not been appointed by politicians, and they believe that they are making the right decisions. And that's that's the best you can do, by the way, just have an independent judiciary. Travelling to Norway with a friend who lived there, it seems that Norway was a fantastic place to live as long as you're Norwegian. Well, that's what this is. I mean, this is my experience of people from all of, you know, I've known people from Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. Netherlands is a bit different. Netherlands is not quite the same. And they are, I mean, if you met them, you'd probably think, not all of them, you know, there are some woke Scandinavians as well, but quite a lot of them are quite racist. It's not, I mean, there's different, I mean, it's like, when I say that, I'm all hesitant to say it just to explain what I mean by that. I don't mean that they think people with different skin colour or something are inferior to them. But they certainly don't want, they're very anti-immigration. They don't want them too many of them living near them, right? And it's the same as in this country. Like, people in this country are told to be anti-immigration because it's diluting the culture. And it's not at all diluting the culture. but none, like, give me I mean, none of these people can give me an example of, so what aspect of our culture has been diluted? Give me an example of something, some aspect of British culture that has been diluted by immigration. They can't come up with anything. The best some of them come up with was something like, oh, well, when I was a kid, there was like this thing. It's like, well, that's just the times, isn't it? Like if you talk about, oh, when I was a kid, you sort of went out and stuff like that and did all these community things. And it's like, yeah, that's because there was all these pubs or something. That's not immigrant. Immigrants haven't taken your pubs away. It's because people buy beer from Tesco and invite their mates round to their house because it's cheaper and more comfortable, right? We entertain more in the home now. We have online. We have the internet. So... But in terms of our cultural behaviour, it's the same as it always was. Why don't you ping in there saying, Phil, Starmer's speech, I haven't caught up on COP30 yet. Starmer's speech at COP30 was bang on point in terms of messaging, in my opinion. Good, I'll check up on that in a minute. I was given a little crib sheet because I'm tuned into a climate group connected to my little thing in summer. So I am going to be doing something on COP this week. So I'd already looked at... Now, in terms of... So there are good and bad things in terms of the UK government's attitude to this. So the good thing... So, OK, he did a good speech. Good. That's, number one. He's gone there. Because that's not the case for everyone. Not all world leaders have gone there. A lot have. But not all. Trump's certainly not gone. But even from some other ones, So actually, it is a big deal. Apparently as well... There were some people, these blue Labour, sorry, apologies. I'm assuming it's the Blue Labour group. I don't know that for certain. But apparently there were some people in Labour trying to persuade Starmer not to go. So there's definitely anti-climate emergency elements in Labour. But, so the positive there, the positive for Starmer going is, first of all, he's gone, right? So our Prime Minister has gone. That tells the world that the UK government's taken it seriously. And if there were forces inside Labour trying to persuade him not to go and he's ignored them, that also means that Starmer personally is invested in this. So that's also a good sign. There are some problems though. So for example, we've caused a bit of a stink in there's a fund that we're not paying into and really should, to help revitalise and protect what's left of rainforests. So there's like a rainforest fund. And yeah, we've disappointed a lot of people at the conference because although we are involved in it, we were on the ground floor on it, so to speak, we're not going to be contributing to it just yet. And it's seen as a bit silly because this fund isn't charity. It's not giving money away just to protect rainforests. It's actually it's set up as an investment, so it has returns attached to it. So I'm not happy about that. I'm also not happy about some of it's only speculation. But if in the budget, for example, some money happens to disappear, and I really hope it doesn't because it wouldn't make sense on any level, but there is speculation that some money may be squeezed from the budget for insulating homes. Now that would be silly because first of all, if you insulate someone's home, they don't have to spend as much on energy. So I know from the political point of view, it doesn't make the energy cap go down, but it does make that person's household bills go down. And ultimately what Labour want is for people to feel better off. Well, if they don't have to spend as much on heating in the winter, that will help them feel better off. So if there is any money taken away from like subsidies and inducements to make homes more energy efficient, that will be disappointing as well. Do I have a passport? No, I don't. Derek's there saying, Phil, fish and chips. Can't find a fish and chip shop for all the Indian and Chinese takeaways. Rubbish. There's fish and chip shops everywhere. And who eats their food? Everyone there goes British culture. Yeah, but you get fish and chip shops everywhere. I mean, fish and chips have become way more... I mean, it actually surprises me in a way that there aren't fewer fish and chip shops. I mean, there are fewer than there would have been. But that's because fish and chips used to be cheap. It used to be a cheap meal, a cheap takeaway for people with not much money. Now it's not. It's actually really expensive. It's more expensive than the bloody Indian these days. But that is, of course, because Brexit and a combination of other things has massively shot up the cost of everything. The cost of energy, the cost of fish, cost of potatoes even. You know, I mean, everything's gone up. And fish and chip shops have actually been hit harder than most other types, but we still have them. I could have had fish and chips today when I was in London. When I stopped at the pub, I had a burger instead. Could have had fish and chips. Reckon Ed Miliband still where he is because because Stour refused to back down on his Stour refused to back down on his position. Well, yeah, there were people who wanted Ed Miliband gone from that position because he is probably one of the most qualified secretaries of state for any department that we've had for a very long time. I mean, Ed Miliband, first of all, it's his big thing. It's always good if you can get someone to run a government department where what that department does is their like hobby type of thing, you know, their sort of professional specialism, but also the massive amount of experience. He was in a similar role, like he represented us at COP when the last Labour government were in power. So he's effectively been a climate minister like over 15 years ago. And then obviously that was still his thing while in opposition. And now that's it. So he's got a massive amount of knowledge, hugely knowledgeable. So he's like one of the most perfect fits for a Secretary of State you can get. And the most perfect fit of any Secretary of State we've got for anything at the moment. The Scandinavian countries are dramatically different. Okay, they're social democratic capitalist countries. Come and see Denmark and send you a ticket. I'm not saying to each other there's not these huge differences, but to us, as you've just said, they're social democracies, and all of them have on some social policy, they're quite progressive on things like education and penal policy. Whereas traditionally in this country, we have tended, when it comes to social policy, you know, it's like penal policy is the big one that we're really, Labour traditionally, because it's like I keep saying, like, let me see if I can, I can't find it just now, sorry. Still need to transfer files from the computer. But the, you know, when I describe the political compass, and it's like those people who are left wing, they're left wing, they want strong public services, they want the government to make sure that services are delivered properly. So even when they're privatised, that the government tightly regulates things. They want decent jobs, they want workers' rights. So all the usual left wing stuff, but they're socially conservative. They're not liberal at all. They want, you know, they're anti-immigration. They're fairly monocultural. They're suspicious of other cultures. They don't mind eating a curry. Oh, they'll be down the curry house, no problem at all. That's where they are now. They're having a curry right now, moaning about foreigners. But that's what they're doing. And usually what happened is, and I've said this many times before, but decades ago, what used to happen is when it was really Labour, like when basically 95% of people voted either Labour or the Conservatives, and that was all there was to it. Labour to try and attract those people would basically have to choose. They would either vote Labour for the public services, for the better services and workers' rights, or they would vote Conservative because they were more in line with them in terms of attitudes on like social policy, immigration, benefits, you know, prison systems and so on, law and order. And sometimes it was, you know, sometimes people would flip between them for that reason. Whereas what Labour used to do to try and appeal to them, their sop to them was always on prison. So it was always like, oh, well, we'll just be tougher on, you know, like Tony Blair's, when he was Shadow Home Secretary, when John Smith was Labour leader, his famous slogan was tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. It's a very good slogan. And again, that's because Labour traditionally, right up until that government, traditionally wanted to be much more socially liberal than the Conservatives, but the way they sort of said, oh, but we'll crack down on law and order. Whereas now they're having to sort of branch out into other areas as well. And it's a very bad fit. It's a very bad fit, and it's causing all sorts of problems internally with Labour. Because people in Labour sort of accept the tough law and order message, because no one wants criminals running free, right? That's not a left or right issue. So they're sort of okay with that, even if they don't think it's necessarily the best way to do it. But in terms of other policies, there are anti-immigration people on the left. There are anti-trans people on the left. There are all sorts of bigots on the left. But traditionally, Labour has been more comfortable than the Conservatives being progressive on those issues, and not anymore. But anyway, Ivan there saying, I never used to like Ed Miliband, but I do now. I mean, I always used to like him. I just didn't think he was much good. When he wasn't much good, he clearly wasn't much good, or he wasn't good enough when he was Labour leader. But I always liked him. I always thought, he was trying his best. But at the end of the day, that's not good enough in politics. Trying your best and failing means we have a right-wing government, which means people die and people are plunged into poverty, and more of the family silverware is sold off to rich people who take it out of the country, and our economy struggles. I don't know how often I need to say it. If you give national assets to people privately, it doesn't matter whether they're based in the UK or not. That money is going over offshore, either because they'll put it offshore to dodge tax, or they'll just sell it to someone else. Eventually, it'll get sold to someone who doesn't even live here. And that is going to, the economy is money. Money has to cycle around an economy. If you move the money out of the country, it's not cycling around our own trade system. And that's the thing, because the economy, there's no such thing as the UK economy, it's global. The best way to keep money intact, because there's no real boundaries, so the best way to keep money circulating around your own economy is to make sure the state manages as much as possible. I'm not a communist. I'm not talking about having everything controlled by the state, but you want a lot owned by the state. The more you've got owned by the state, the stronger your economy can be. Because in any other system, in a capitalist system, it flows out. It flows off somewhere else. It flows to the place that doesn't charge as much tax. And if people are going, well, we should charge less tax then we can't afford the public services. And people in this country want the public services. So this is why I keep saying we should be more like the Scandinavian countries, because we, like they, have a population that wants the strong public services. No mic issues tonight. Did I change anything since the Monday, Tuesday live streams? No, apart from apparently throwing my phone over there. It's the only thing I did. So maybe that's what I have to do. The mining village I grew up in was economically left-wing but socially conservative, very much like mine. It's the same. And this is why Reform UK are doing so well, because they've tapped into it now. Because they look like a left-wing conservative government to left-wing conservative voters. They are the classic Brexit, even though they openly describe themselves as right-wing. They openly call them. But you've got to remember, most voters don't care about left or right. They don't even know what. I keep tearing my hair out at so-called political commentators who themselves don't seem to know what left and right is. They need to be like Jimmy Cricket. Write it on their shoes. But most people don't even give a shit. They don't even give a shit about left and right. They have their politics, and what aligns with them, they think Reform UK align with them. So they've got that mass of left-wing, socially conservative voters, and they are a mass, right? Unlike left-wing liberal voters. Left-wing liberal voters split into lots of different groups. There's lots of different factions within them. There isn't really a lot of factions. If you talk to left-wing but socially conservative people, they're all very similar in their views. And that's why Labour are chasing after them. People are upset about it. I'm upset about the necessity of it. I'm not upset at the fact they're chasing them because it's easier. I'm sorry. They're the biggest voting bloc because most of them want the same thing. All Labour have to deliver to win those people over, cost of living, that people have to feel that the cost of living has eased and they are now actually better off, right? It's not easy, but that's something for which you can have a plan, right? The NHS needs to be noticeably better. Usually, Labour governments can be relied upon to do that. And the third thing, they want immigration under control. Now, given that Labour are not going to do anything realistically about the small boats, I think Labour are risking that one a bit. But nonetheless, you can do that. You can do that. And Labour looking at Denmark for it makes sense. I'm sorry if people don't like it. I don't particularly like it, but at the same time, it is politically astute. They're copying a left-wing government that has a population that's anti-immigration. It's really that simple. And that's it. If Labour deliver those three things, they win those voters. Whereas there are no three things they can get to win over left-wing liberal. I'm not saying it's the fault of left-wing liberals, by the way. You can vote for whatever you want, but I'm saying that because left-wing liberals are more divided, then it's really hard to get their votes. Because what appeals to one group doesn't appeal to the other, and the other, and the other. So you get a better return chasing after the group that's massive and wants three things. Derek, they're saying, in some towns, the local economy is driven by the NHS as the main employer. Government grants for councils stimulate local economies and level up. Austerity destroyed this wealth redistribution route. I mean, austerity threw it completely out. I mean, there was a case where some of these economies were still going backwards even after 13 years of Labour, as it happens. But there we go. Pranita, last question here, only because I'm curious. Thoughts on Owen Jones being sued over his Gaza commentary? I don't know anything about it, in all honesty. I know he's been sued for libel. So someone thinks he wrote something that was defamatory to them. I honestly have no idea what it's about. And even if I did, I still wouldn't have any thoughts because I have no idea. I'm all I can say is the only reason I picked that question out, because at the end of the day, it's one of these things the court will decide. I haven't got a clue. I don't know what the arguments for or against are, and even if I did, I'm not a lawyer. But I'll tell you what I find weird about it, in that I can't understand why it's worth anyone's time to sue him. Because it would be different if he was a more mainstream voice. If whatever this person feels, because that's libel. I'm not an expert on it, but we've seen a few defamation cases of late, have we not? And what's made very clear to you is that in order to win a case for defamation or anything like it, you have to prove that you've suffered material harm, as well as a few other things. You have to prove that, in this case, Owen Jones has said something that he had no reasonable cause to believe, right? Even that, I don't know what it is, so even that might be doubtful. But has he really caused anyone material harm? I mean, this would be different if it were like someone, whose platform was such that millions of people in the country suddenly thought a thing. But I very much doubt that the average person on the street even knows who Owen Jones is. That's all I can say on it, but it's one of these things. We'll just have to see what happens. Apparently, it's led to death threats against the person suing Jones. Oh, well, shouldn't that be a criminal case then? But okay, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But again, I'm still going to argue that, I mean, this will be where it gets tricky, I suppose. Because if you say something like, let's say I'm criticise Nigel Farage all the time. I did it earlier today, didn't I? So let's say a load of people on the basis of my video send death threats to Nigel Farage. Well, that's not my fault, is it? As long as what I've said is true as I understand it, I think it's fair. If some nutters get outraged by it, because I want people to be outraged at the sort of behaviour I call out. Michelle Mone in this stream, Nigel Farage in my last video. What was my first video? Oh, I wasn't raging at anyone there. But Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss a little bit, Donald Trump, Michelle Mone. I want people to be outraged at these people. I don't want them to attack them or anything. I just want them to demand that the government take action. But if a load of people are so outraged by something I tell them in a video that they go and send death threats, that's not my fault, is it? So, anyway, we will see. But I don't know anything about it. It causes me material harm, earache, whenever he goes bellyache in his support of Johnson, which led to the worst government ever. Well, you know, we just don't listen to them if we don't want to. But we'll leave it there anyway. I'm going to go and get some tea now. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.